All right, hello everyone, and welcome to an episode of Dear Dr. Fantasy. And for my very, very special guests today, it's two to ramble. It's Richard and Austin.
Woo, woo, woo.
Hello, guys. How are you?
Oh, we're doing well. Thanks for having us on.
Ready for a fun conversation. Thanks a bunch. We're stoked. We're ready to chat.
All right. Well, I am excited to chat with the two of you. I don't often for DDF get to talk to two people simultaneously, but you two are inseparable, essentially. So it's just,
Unfortunately, yeah.
yeah.
We yeah, we've locked it in. There's no going
We,
back.
we can't even change the channel name because the two is in the channel name. We
Yeah.
we couldn't even Rich couldn't just kick me out and just it would be weird. It would kind of be a off brand in a way.
It's a
We
lifetime
could replace
obligation.
each other. That could work.
Philip, are
Phil.
you open to by the end of this episode you have to decide who you want to do this channel with. Good luck.
I mean, you could change it to three to ramble, I guess, right?
Could we?
Nah,
Nah.
nah.
Nah, 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 nah.
The name stays the same. The name is eternal. People are transient, but the
Mm.
name is
The name is the permanent thing.
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Well, in any case, we are ready to ramble here. So I'm very, very excited to talk to the two of you and discover what makes To to Ramble tick. If we can do that, is
Wow.
that? Do you think that's possible? I hope. I
Eh,
mean,
we'll find out. I don't know if we want to find that answer, but we'll endeavor to try.
We needed a good conversation with a doctor. I know you're not, doctor's a broader term, but you can psychoanalyze us. You can
I could try.
cure us in a way. So please,
We had a
please,
nice therapy session with book board, and we need like a proper doctor.
a sit down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You probably were in safer hands with Bookborn, honestly, but I'll do my best. So,
Safer. She's tough. She has tough love.
yes, yes, yeah,
Mm.
I definitely tough love right there, but emphasis on the word love, of course.
Yes.
Uh, well, I am excited to hear your story, and maybe while so this is going to be a little bit of a twist because it is the two of you, but I think it'll be fun. I will have my standard question for you two, but in the process of, I'm sure, this very neat narrative we're about to hear about your reading journeys, at some point you're going to tell us how you two met and how this came together and everything else. This wonderful channel, Two to Ramble, and yeah. So, but first of all, going on the theory that you are what you read, Richard and
Mhm.
Austin. What are some of the formative reads of your lives? What are some of the important reading journeys you've been on that could help explain who you are? So, whichever of you wants to start, actually, can go ahead, and we'll just kind of go back and forth, and I'm sure it'll be as
Yeah.
neat as can be.
Richard, what is it for you? What was that formative read?
So I have base for my reading journey. There's kind of like two main periods. There's before high school, and then after college.
Okay. And in
Between
high
high
school,
school
there's
and
this
college,
big gap.
I barely read in
Yeah.
that. YouTube took over my life, gaming, all those other things. Terrible, terrible thing to take over. But
Yeah.
before that, um, before high school, I read a lot of uh, Hardy Boys books, the Magic Tree House series,
Oh yeah.
Right.
and a particularly formative book for me that still sticks in my brain and really cemented my love for fantasy was The Magician's Nephew. That
Oh,
was one of my
from the
favorite books
Narnia
growing up.
Chronicles. The
Yep.
Narnia. I like that one too. Yeah. Yeah.
I there's just something about I like it more than Narnia, a lot
Uh-huh.
more actually.
Yeah.
There's something I think more mystical about it. But that was my those were the most formative ones for me, and then afterward it would be The Way of Kings. The Way of Kings started me off on reading all of the different fantasy books that you see behind me.
Okay. I think that is, you would be shocked to hear, I'm sure, that Brandon Sanderson is probably one of the most common answers I get to why, or just responses to the idea, why do I love reading now? Right?
Mm.
Hmm.
Just why do I love reading now?
Yeah.
And the most common answer has honestly probably the Mistborn trilogy, but
Mhm.
Way of Kings, great. I mean, he is one of the ones that brings a lot of people back into reading
Yeah.
after, and it's usually like high school, even college years. I didn't read while I was in high school or college. I was busy. I mean, I read, but it was for classes or whatever. And then I discovered X book, and it just the spark went off, and I got back into reading, and here I am now. I have a BookTube channel, la la la. Brandon Sanderson's probably the most common one that I hear about. That this is the author who brought me, made me a reader again.
He's a
Yeah.
great transition from that. Okay, you used to read and you're getting back in as an introductory book back into fantasy or back into adult reading too.
Yep,
But at the same time, it's not that his stuff is just YA and simple and no, just for new people. It's also for experienced readers too. It's just
sure.
he hits that wide appeal to where if you're going to recommend another author, sometimes it can get a lot more niche. Sanderson's just meta concept. A lot of people can like a Sanderson book, no matter what your taste is. And
Yep.
that was the same for to get back into reading. That was a similar answer to Rich of obviously Way of Kings and Sanderson got me back into adult reading.
Okay,
But
cool.
my foundation goes back to kids' books would have been also Magic Treehouse. The Pendragon series is something I looked back pretty fondly on.
Uh-huh.
Of I've said this to Rich before, of course, but Pendragon is this like 10 book saga. It's a portal fantasy. I can't remember much more than that. The details have been erased in my mind. I just remember loving them as a kid and then reading page one of it as an adult, just going, "Oh, that's the series I love. Let's see how it is." And what if it the nostalgia is still there? I read the first page and I refused to read that series again because it
Oh,
was very hard to read. I was going, "Oh, this is not written for 27-year-old Austin to read. This is written for a middle schooler, an elementary schooler." I was probably like 10 when I read this, and it reads for a 10-year-old. It's perfect for a 10-year-old.
it did its job. It
It
did
did
its
its
job.
job.
It's work. I
It,
also read Pendragon. I loved it. It's
yeah,
one. I loved it more than the Percy Jackson series, the Hunger Games stuff. Like I read that stuff and was like, I liked it, but I was never on the Percy Jackson train.
we
Okay.
should read Pendragon just to
Oh,
that
but
would be
it would hurt.
fun. It would hurt.
It would
I
hurt.
don't know if the nostalgia would be there or just the modern pretentiousness of us going, "Oh, this is
Oh no, it would.
uh,
We would be killing a very kind, positive memory
yeah,
in
never
our
mind.
hearts.
Yeah, it would."
It'd
And,
be snuffing out that little flame.
Oh yeah.
yeah, we don't want to snuff that out. But I was a big Percy Jackson fan too. I never got into Harry Potter. I still haven't read Harry Potter, but I was very
Oh,
much a Percy
Yeah.
Jackson kid, and that brought me through a lot of. I did Heroes of Olympus as well. So, however, whenever that last Heroes of Olympus book came out, I was up to date on those books.
okay.
But the YA era for me, I still read somewhat in high school, just not a lot. I was your Hunger Games, Divergent, Maze Runner, those books that were
Okay.
teen dystopia, edgy. That I love those books. And yeah, that's kind of where my foundation came about. I trend you can see the pattern was some fantasy and then got into more dystopian. And I think the one critical element before becoming an adult, the book that wowed me was an assigned book in high school. To every assigned book that I was given, never loved them. I was reading Great Gatsby, going, okay, this I like it, but it felt as though I was reading it for school. But the
Uh-huh.
one book that changed it was Ender's Game, and
Okay.
Ender's Game
Yeah.
for me was an assigned reading from high school
Okay.
sci-fi book, and I was going, oh, this is, and then the plot twist in Ender's Game, which I won't say just in case for people, but that blew my mind, and I went, holy crap, this genre special. So that was something that I remember fondly, and that definitely probably stepped into my mind of why I love a lot of sci-fi and fantasy stuff.
Yeah.
I
Well,
had the
speaking
same experience
It,
with Ender's
Ender's
Game.
Game was,
of Ender's
ooh,
Game. Okay.
Mhm.
yep.
Speaking as an educator and one who started a fantasy novels course in my at my college,
Yeah.
I have found that the most enthusiasm and the best discussions I've ever had have been on genre fiction, on fantasy. Like
Mhm.
I have students who do get into the classics, who do, thank goodness some of them do like Beowulf, but if you want to see them really the eyes light up and really get some exciting discussions and just a whole lot of fun, while there's some very deep fantastic thematic, just great character work, you name it, in the genre. There's plenty of material. It's not like, oh, this is all fluff and you can't have a discussion about it. There are plenty of great reads in the fantasy genre that you could really dig into. So why is it that we don't have more people teaching Ender's Game or A Wizard of Earthsea or Malazan or whatever, these deeper reads that you could really dig into from the genre? There are plenty of great authors, but I think there's a kind of a snobbery, or there's, I don't know, it's just sad to me because you're telling me that this is what you got you excited. And isn't that, as educators, what we want? We want our students to get excited to become
Yeah.
readers, right?
Yeah, and you have to start with the exciting that you have to at least get started in
Yeah.
all of this before uh, reading Lonesome Dove. Uh, uh, ask me on, you know, ask me on a particular day, it's my favorite book ever. I would have never gotten to that point without reading a bunch more and just getting used to the genre, getting
Right.
used to these longer books, and falling in love with reading in general. I wouldn't have gotten there. And so
Hmm.
you need to spark the love of it. But I'll pass something along to you because we recently we recorded the video on it, but I think it's really relevant. We read the essay, Why Are Americans Afraid of Dragons by
Right. Look,
Ursula
Wade,
K. Le Guin.
I love that. I love that. I did a video on that essay a couple of years ago. Yeah.
I watched your videos, great, and
Oh,
your On Fairy Stories video from Tolkien.
cool.
Both
Yeah.
you have great
I mean,
breakdowns. Yeah.
they go well together. Those two
Mhm.
essays are
Yes.
kind of a not answer, but a continuation of each other,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and in some way.
And they're both
And
brilliant essays. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think it's that essay spoke a lot more to today's time than I expected,
Yeah.
especially being written in 1974.
Yeah.
I think some of it maybe is dated, but the particular last point on, at least for men, of the impression that fantasy and sci-fi is frivolous
Mhm.
and is not productive, is somehow less than, like, you should be doing something more with your time, you should be improving yourself, you should be making more money, whatever it is.
Right.
That's the impression of fantasy, and it doesn't have the, I don't know, the intellectual highbrow nature that maybe educators should give it.
Yeah.
And her main argument there about how people think they're getting what they want of, hey, look, I have this car, I have this colored television, look at all, and it's written in 1974, so color television was a big deal, but look at all these things I'm providing and I'm getting. I don't need this fantasy, this fluff. But then her argument is, well, fantasy and fiction in general is what you need. It's what the soul needs. You might think you have all these wants and you have your
You
quote
have your
unquote need,
stuff.
you have your stuff. However, fiction just fills this hole that you don't even realize is missing. I love, that's a fantastic essay.
And
Yeah.
to answer what, like, the moments that you see your students, like, spark a fire in their eyes, is
Yeah.
Yeah.
that fantasy. It's a need being filled.
Oh yeah.
And like it or not,
That's right.
in some ways, a lot of the other classic novels that are more nonfiction, or at least rooted far more in reality and not, doesn't spark the imagination, I don't
Yeah.
think fills the same hole.
I think it's a matter of accessibility in a way, because if you go on Goodreads and look at ratings for like the Odyssey, right? It's low. It's just very, a lot of high school kids are forced to read the Odyssey, and they take out their displeasure on Goodreads by giving it a 1 star or something like that.
Right.
I do think that after a certain amount of reading and preparation, uh, people can love the Odyssey, even today. Now, there were different expectations in terms of storytelling back when the Odyssey was a young story, right? It was a
Mhm.
very different mindset in terms of what stories do and how you go about telling them, and what they accomplish in some ways. In some ways, it's still the same. We still have the same themes. We talk about mortality and love and all the same things, but there are definitely different conventions and understandings of how stories work. And for a modern person with no training whatsoever to pick it up and try to make sense of it, it can be difficult, to be honest. And so I can understand why someone would be like, I don't enjoy this at all, 1 star. But after a certain amount of training and understanding, you can appreciate that much more. And the magic is there, right? You can be like Homer's, well, not quite, but you could be more like Homer's original audience, listening to that tale over the fireside and getting excited and understanding the beautiful truths that are conveyed in these myths and things, right? So I do think that there's a matter of accessibility there. But what I will say is that you guys are totally onto something here in that fantasy, I want to defend fantasy when I hear people attack it as frivolous, as silly, as dorky or whatever. Because not only do I think all literature is important, but fantasy is unique. Fantasy can do certain things better than any other kind of literature. And I want to hear what you guys think about that idea. What does fantasy do uniquely? We all know what literature can do in a broad sense, right? It helps us with our struggles. It helps us understand the world. It helps us to see ourselves in others, to, et cetera, et cetera. That's all great. And I think I support all kinds of fiction. I love it. But fantasy to me is unique and it meets certain needs better than any other genre in many ways. So I wonder if you agree with that first. And secondly, if you do, what do you guys think fantasy does that other genres can't quite measure up to?
I mean, from the books behind us, we agree.
We definitely do.
Yeah, I thought
I,
so.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do subscribe to the idea that Tolkien talks about on
Mm.
fairy stories of the idea of a secondary world,
Mm,
and there's almost something like getting closer to the divine of one for a writer to create a secondary world, like God would create our world, and there's like the primary and the secondary, and then exploring a secondary world
mm,
is special. Compare that to a book that takes place, not necessarily, it is fiction, but it takes place in our world. Well, now you're not in a secondary world. You can still have an adventure. There's still some great things, but
mm.
there's something better, and I think people are driven toward creating or exploring our own our own universe, our own, like, where we are masters, where we are above the world. When I read a nonfiction or a fiction book that takes place in our world, I'm with them. I'm not necessarily above the world. In a secondary world, I am. I
Mm,
get to be, God on high to this new world, and I get to explore it. There's
yeah,
something special about that.
yeah.
That is definitely the case. Tolkien puts it in that essay and says it's the escape of a prisoner, not the flight of a deserter.
Yes.
Often
Hmm.
quoted, and that's how I see it too. Fantasy allows you to escape this prison that is our world, to put it in his terms as well, more than any other genre can. Because the more you can convince a reader, you could do this magic act, which is that secondary world. The more you can play the magician of actually making somebody suspend their disbelief and go, "Oh, this flying tooth fairy creature that's spitting out lava, that's real," and make you believe it's real for the context of the story,
Mm,
is so impressive to me because it can do something that hits that imagination for you, which also goes back to Ursula K. Le Guin's point about what this imagination that's been stomped and quelled, that you as a child is often, you shouldn't disdain, you shouldn't push down a child's imagination. That should be something that's flourished and used as a tool.
It
She
yes.
As she uses the word discipline, and
Discipline,
discipline
yeah.
not being to crush and eliminate, but to control.
Yeah.
Where a child may have undisciplined imagination,
Yeah.
an adult shouldn't eliminate their imagination, but a disciplined imagination.
Hmm.
And this is where they link too, because Tolkien's essay and Le Guin's essay talk about this point of truth, of what is true. And I think the end line of Ursula K. Le Guin's essay is uh, so the such statements as "once upon a time there was a dragon," or "in a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit." It's by such beautiful non-facts such as these that we fantastic human beings may arrive in our peculiar fashion at the truth. And
Beautiful.
it's probably close to that, something like that. But she
Yeah.
says basically, look at these things that aren't true, these non-facts. Well, that's what's beautiful about it, and that I think that summarizes. These aren't even our this isn't at this point. It's not our defensive fantasy. It's other authors who could say it better than us defensive fantasy, which we
Yeah.
agree with. And I think that's profound. That's the stuff. Those are the things that get us invested, and that imagination, that secondary world, everything we just said, that's why fantasy is just nothing could be done like it.
Yeah. Oh, I so agree with you. And another giant upon whose shoulders we can stand in order to see what fantasy can do for us is Stephen Donaldson. He's another one. I don't know if you've read his essays on epic fantasy yet.
Not yet, no.
No,
That's your next assignment.
Okay, what's
Steve,
the essay called?
Stephen Dawes.
So I don't remember the title. There are two essays that he wrote about epic fantasy specifically.
Okay.
And in one of them, one is older and one's kind of an update. And in the update one, he mentions Malazan specifically. But
Oh, cool.
yeah, yeah. And for him, he defines fantasy, epic fantasy specifically, as the literature of reintegration. The literature of reintegration. Reintegration meaning so in our modern world, we have a sense of our absurdity. We have a sense of our being disconnected, isolated, alienated, that the universe doesn't really have a whole lot of meaning to it, and that we're a bunch of absurd creatures kicking around here, screaming, trying to in our futile efforts to make meaning out of all of this, right? That's a very common view in modern times, whether it be existentialist or just full out nihilistic or what have you, right? It's just this sort of view of us as being essentially disconnected. And fantasy, says Donaldson, is a form of reclaiming our connection. It's a
Mm.
way we can enact through the story, through that vicarious journey that we're going on with the characters, a sense of meaning and feel a sense of reintegration with the world around us, with the people around us, that sense of connection and meaning, which is vital to our experiencing purpose in the world, right? So for him, I mean, he does it much better than I'm doing right now, but he just does a marvelous job of explaining how epic fantasy specifically is an enactment of meaning, and it helps us to feel like we belong here and that what we do matters, essentially.
Mm.
We're not just absurd and futile, and that what we do here really matters. It's a brilliant essay. There's a lot of psychological insights. They're both fairly short as well. But that should be your next one
Yeah.
if you're
Yeah.
A question for you. Oh, you have a question as well?
Yeah,
Yeah, I have a question too.
I'm curious by that definition, is there some kind of incoherence then with the idea of like grimdark
That was my
fantasy?
exact question.
Yeah.
That was my
yeah.
yeah.
Where there's a because I see certain problems with some stories of like there are books that look like they're grimdark in the sense of their setting, they're seeing the actions that happen in the book,
Yeah.
but ultimately go in a direction of hope and that the future and your actions matter.
Yeah.
Like there's some type of like I think Malazan is a wonderful example of surface level, maybe people would think it is grimdark of
Uh-huh.
just the stuff that happens in it, but it isn't. It has a really hopeful message. It's about camaraderie, friendship, that your actions have meaning,
Compassion. Yeah. All of that.
compassion. Is there is there then something a little incoherent about a grimdark side where the point, the message of the story is life is random, there is no inherent meaning,
Right.
and that ultimately nothing matters.
Yeah. So my answer to that, and it's not Stephen Donaldson's answer, I can't
Mhm.
speak for him. But my answer to that is he is, first of all, he's speaking specifically of epic fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he's not including Grimdark in that. But I think personally that Grimdark has a really important purpose. And I do think that it is. I have said many times on this platform that to me, Grimdark is fantasy's version of existentialism. That, or sometimes it can verge even into nihilism. So the difference being existentialism is where the universe has no intrinsic meaning, but what you do matters. You can carve meaning out of your life. You can do it by doing things, by doing deeds, by connecting with other people and finding meaning in those relationships. So what you do matters in existentialism.
Mhm.
I think it's a fairly heroic outlook, actually, to say, yeah, we're surrounded by darkness. It's going to snuff us out probably someday, but we can make some light while we're here, you know? And there's something beautiful and meaningful in that, in just that, you know? Whereas nihilism is there's no meaning, and whatever you do doesn't matter at all. Just nothing matters, period, right? And then there's absurdism where nothing matters and what you do doesn't matter, but you're doomed to try to make meaning out of it and you'll fail again and again. And aren't you silly? Yeah.
Mm,
So that's what that is.
Hmm.
So you see all those things in, I think, what we call grimdark, right? I think you see that whole spectrum in grimdark. And I think it's important to have this in our genre as well. So I love epic fantasy. That's probably my wheelhouse, where there's some clear hope injected into what may be, like in Malazan, a very dark story at times. But there is, and I totally agree with you, Richard, that there's plenty of meaning in the end, right? That after all that suffering and that darkness, there is an important emphasis on not just hope, but connection and purpose. And there is something that that series to me points to that is ultimately affirmative of life. Okay.
mm,
So there, I would not refer to it as grimdark actually, but I don't care if someone wants to think of it that way. That's fine with me. But yeah, but that's not to disparage grimdark at all because I think it's important. I think it is actually empowering if you have a story where yeah, things are terrible, but even if something, let's say, as bleak as First Law, okay, the Joe Abercrombie storytelling is incredibly bleak, right? You do have characters who try to do the noble thing or who try to better themselves, and almost always they just go splat. You know, they fall on their faces. Whatever noble efforts they make prove to be absurd, and so on and so on. It's you could call it absurdist even. But Abercrombie makes me laugh, and he makes me feel connected to these characters. And there is some something elevating, something affirming about that to me, and that I enjoy it. There's just usually there's some kind of affirmation or light, and there's a spectrum, of course,
mm,
but so anyway, yeah, that's a long answer to your question, but I think what he's talking about specifically is more epic fantasy. And
mm.
yes, there's a lot of fantasy nowadays that is definitely a lot darker than that, and where there's no affirmative answer necessarily. But there is something heroic even in the struggle, I think, to find meaning, even if you feel like you're doomed.
What is that key to you between an existentialist book or a nihilistic one? Something that says, yes, meaning is what you make of it, or versus there is no meaning.
Yeah.
What is the key element?
I'd say that the key element there, and it's fuzzy. I can't say, I wouldn't collect a whole bunch of grimdark books and say this one's existentialist, this one's nihilist, right?
Mhm.
It's probably more like a spectrum. This one leans more this way, and this one you can see. But fundamentally, what I'd look for is the sense that after the character struggles, there is a sense of meaning and maybe a little bit of hope, some affirmation that it matters, that what they do matters in the end, that this adventure they've been on, it may not save the universe or whatever, but maybe just that relationship that happened along the way gives that character a sense of meaning in their lives. I would look for that. And if there's none of that, then maybe what we're looking at is more nihilistic.
Got
That
it.
would be that would
Mm.
be my answer to it. But I don't know. That's a pretty. I don't know if that's evasive or not, but that's the best I can do.
Oh, great, great answer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that, but it makes me think about it is some of the problems that George R. R. Martin is having with a Game of Thrones and also a Song of Ice and Fire kind of simultaneously
Yeah.
is it is epic fantasy. And at least from the show, the direction of it seems to be a bit more nihilistic. Like not
Mm,
the answer at the end is very much a nothing matters. But
yeah.
and I'm wondering if that is just having like, there's a problem with wrapping up an epic fantasy that way. And I'm wondering if there's a unique problem there.
Yeah. If it my personal take is that felt like a very empty ending. With the end of season 8 of a
Yeah.
Game of Thrones, that felt, or Game of Thrones, right? That's the HBO series. A
Game
Game
of Thrones was HBO series. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay, yeah.
Yep.
The first book is Anyway,
Game of Thrones was the first
A
book.
Game of
Yeah.
Thrones book, and then Game of Thrones is the HBO series. So,
Mm.
yeah. Okay. Anyway, yeah, that left me feeling very empty and like, why? I almost actually thought that last episode was a joke. I actually thought I was watching this thing. I was like, are they making fun of us with this? Is this a joke? Is this like a
It was
the
that
end of
bad,
Monty
Rich. Yeah.
Python?
Yeah.
You know, the end of Monty Python's and the Holy Grail?
Oh yeah,
Have you,
it's great.
it's fantastic.
Hilarious.
It's hilarious. The ending of that non-ending ending of that. I thought they were pulling a Monty Python on us, actually. And then I realized, no, this is supposed to be a serious ending. Oh no, this is
Oh,
I think the sad
terrible.
thing is too, they were trying to make it somewhat not like they were attempting to have it be meaningful. The attempt was, oh, look at this bittersweet ending. That was I think what they were trying to do. Did they fail
Yeah,
miserably in every
it fell
regard?
so
Yes.
flat. To
Yeah.
me,
the
it felt so flat.
I think the real worry is it's hard for me to imagine that the writers there and the D&D didn't actually talk to George about this. And I don't think that they ended the series in a way that was vastly different from how George wants the ending to be. I
Interesting.
don't think so. I think that was roughly what he wanted. Maybe not the way and like
Bullet
took
points.
bullet points, but like ultimately where he wanted to end it, I think that is it. And maybe the reason why he's having so much trouble writing now is that he has to now rework everything in two books of making a drastically different ending than what he planned.
Only difference is he'd already struggled to write that book before the season came out
Oh
for
yeah.
like a decade prior.
But I mean,
So
how much does that have to add on? Like him going through and then season 8 comes out and goes, "Oh, that is actually how I was going to end the series and I can't do that anymore."
And don't forget, he's got way more plot lines in A Song of Ice and Fire
oh yeah,
that
way
Yeah.
more.
have to be resolved somehow in these two books when the
Mhm.
show couldn't do it in all those seasons. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I am glad we have those five books. I love those five books. I do think that you're onto something with your questioning because it is a series, A Song of Ice and Fire, that feels to a lot of people like it's grimdark. I happen to agree with you, though, that it's actually heroic or epic fantasy. But it's not as clear as, like, say, some others. It's definitely
Mm.
darker than, say, The Lord of the Rings or, many other, even Realm of the Elderlings or something like
Yeah.
that, which has a lot of suffering and all that. But
Mhm.
I think A Song of Ice and Fire is a bit darker. It's darker than the trilogy I'm reading right now, Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, for example, which does go pretty dark at times. But
It
and
does.
inspired Martin actually in many ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, is that series grimdark or is it epic fantasy? And maybe that ambiguity is part of the problem we had with that ending that just didn't seem to fit, right? I don't know.
I think if you read, so I've only read book 1 of A Game of Thrones and I have basically full spoilers for the show. I've been spoiled on that and all lore videos. Like
Yeah.
I'm spoiled enough, but I've only read the first book.
Okay. Okay.
And reading it, yeah, to me, I felt it was just a darker epic fantasy. But
Uh-huh.
ultimately, there, it's the seeds of no, there is a point. There are characters that have problems. They're going to fail, but they also could succeed. There's a point to it. There are heroes. There are
There are
good people.
heroes' journeys going on here. Yeah.
There's good, bad, and then people in between. But you got all of them. It
Yeah.
There's a clear good and bad guy.
Yeah, and then you compare that to First Law, book 1. Yeah, Grimdark. It's
Yeah.
Joe sets up your expectations well. Of
Yeah.
yes, this is the vibe of the story. You're not going to get your epic fantasy hopeful ending. You just probably aren't.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think a lot of it does have to be just expectations going in.
Yeah. Yeah, another example where it clearly to me is the darkest I've ever read is R. Scott Baker's Second Apocalypse series, where it doesn't even have the Abercrombie humor to lighten up this really gritty, dark story. Have you guys read Baker yet?
Not yet.
No,
No.
it's always on the list, but I
Mm.
haven't gotten to it yet.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see what you think. He's a brilliant, immensely talented author. But it's a world where he's exploring the question of whether or not we have any free will at all, and I think his answer is not really. And not only that, but it shows us at our absolute worst in many respects.
What a conversation there too. We were just reading, we did a review on meditations, and that gets into
Aha.
determinism versus free will, and fantasy in general touches on fate and that idea of prophecy a lot. It's a classic trope that is used. It's something that we can all understand, relate to. I guess when it comes to fantasy, or just your view on this, on free will versus this determined fate,
Hmm.
how do you think fantasy handles the topic of fate? What do you think it adds on to the conversation? Because I always find it fascinating that, is fate a chain? Is fate sometimes a bad? Fantasy series do explore this. So sometimes fate is seen as a bad thing. Sometimes fate is a good destiny to follow. So there's warnings with fate that sometimes you misinterpret fate. How does the genre handle that? Because that is something that always fascinates me and gets
Yeah.
you into free will determinist debates all the time. So yeah, what do you think on all that?
Well, this goes back actually.
Yeah.
So, as you probably know, that Tolkien was very much inspired by Old English. He was a scholar of
Yeah.
Old
Yeah.
English. His Beowulf was one of his favorite things, as it is mine. And this idea that you're talking about, this fate versus free will thing, is huge in Old English poetry.
Hmm.
A couple of things are huge there. Life is fleeting, right? And how do we make meaning out of this fleeting existence? And also, fate versus free will is just pervasive in Old English poetry. And it's interesting because in Beowulf, you have lines like "Gath a weird swa he shall," which means fate ever goes as it must, right? Which suggests you don't have a lot of wiggle room there, right? But then there's another line that says, Oft wir nereth unfeindna er von his elendeach, which means often fate spares an undoomed earl or man, warrior, when his courage holds, which suggests that if you're courageous in the face of the darkness, that you can make a difference, right? That you're not entirely, that it's not all written there, that you can change things by being courageous and making decisions. So
Mhm.
these two opposing concepts exist in the same text, right?
That's a reason I love the Lord of the Rings books so much, is you have kind of both type of stories going on. Of I love that Aragorn himself is your archetypical hero of like hero of fate. He has been, the king come again. He is everything that fate and the world should need in our hero.
It's in his
And
blood and everything.
it's in
Yeah.
his blood,
Yeah.
but ultimately our real hero of the story is someone unexpected, and that fate did not choose Frodo, and fate didn't choose Bilbo. It was happenstance in the right moment, and then possibly by the end of that little struggle. I love how much of it is the little things that matter in
Yeah.
life.
It's
And
Bilbo, it's Frodo, and it's Gollum.
it's Gollum.
And Gandalf himself says to Frodo that Bilbo's pity is going to decide
Mhm.
many a great thing, right? I mean, that's not an exact quote, but it's simply to the effect that, well, the idea that Bilbo spared Gollum is going to have that decision, that decision made out of free will, that moment of compassion on Bilbo's part is going to have ripple effects, which we don't know what will happen as a result of that. But and then we see the ending where you could argue Gollum is the hero,
Yeah.
right? In a way, I
I
mean,
I do
intentionally,
love
but
I do love just the more nuanced ending of it, of Frodo fighting against, mortal hobbit fighting against the ultimate evil, like
yeah,
pure evil. And ultimately you see how much he struggles, how much he fights for it, the most courage. He is the best. He's the best of us that
right,
possibly could do it. And at the very end still fails and needs, a helping, divine hand from
right,
it.
right,
But the divine hand couldn't do it alone. It needed Frodo. Like, it's not that, you know, God's whoever manipulation basically was able to destroy the ring.
Right.
But you know, the divine required Frodo, and Frodo required the divine. I love that merging there.
Yeah. No, there's clearly a sense of the numinous at work there, right? There's a
Mhm.
sense that anytime the eagles show up, by the way, that's divine intervention in Lord of the Rings, in Middle Earth, period,
Yeah.
right? But yes, I love that too, the message that even a little person's actions change the world, right? That's
Mhm.
definitely the idea of free will, which I'm quite certain Tolkien subscribed to, that your actions change. That's us. We're the hobbits, really. The hobbits are us in Middle Earth. You know, we're surrounded by this epic, legendary world with this cast of characters like Aragorn and Gandalf and these elves, and they're ethereal and they're archetypal, and we're these little hairy-footed hobbits that are kind of overawed by all of this, but we can make a difference, you know. I think that's really one of the core messages there. Yeah.
What do you think about maybe going a little bit off the beaten path about this? Because Tolkien's faith obviously is shown throughout the book series as well, and his influences. How do you think you personally view this free will versus determinist conversation, this free will versus fate of the both being true? Do you kind of view it as in a chessboard where
Mm.
the rules of the universe are set and you can only move pieces, but you have the freedom to move the pieces where you want in that sort of sense? Is
Yeah.
that, do you think that's where you, when you're reading fantasy, you also see that as well of, hey, there's some sort of rule, there's a world that's set. You can't, humans can't just stand up and fly. You can't just break the systems of the universe, but you can play within that. And is that what fantasy shows to you of just playing within those rules of this, whatever limits that are set beyond our normal world? That's kind of another reason in defense of fantasy. You get to set new rules and set new perspectives. When we were chatting with Ken Liu, I always think back to this. I don't know why, but Ken Liu was saying, hey, I'd love to see a sci-fi story exploring just the view from a satellite, just a satellite going around Earth and its point of view of, I just want to read a book like that. That's just a set. So if anybody wants to write that out there, please do. But my long-winded question of, is that how you kind of view it when you're reading fantasy, that joy you get out of it?
Yeah. To answer a long-winded question succinctly, yes.
Yes. Okay.
But to
Wait,
go
show
into a
me.
little
Yeah.
more detail,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, to me, I certainly have moments when I read R. Scott Baker, who, again,
We
brilliant
gotta read them.
genius.
Yeah.
Yes,
We will. We will.
absolutely. He's amazing. And I've read other books, like Joanna also has read this book by Robert Sapolsky called Behave. And it's a neuroscientist looking at whether or not we have free will. And his answer is, no, we don't, not
Mm.
really. And I read stuff like that, and I'm like intellectually fairly convinced at times.
Yep.
At times, I feel like, yeah, I don't like hearing this, but it's hard to argue that they're wrong. At the same time, I need to live my life as if I have free will. I can't live thinking, well, everything I do is determined, so really nothing I do matters. And so, oh well, you know, I'm gonna live my daily existence as if I'm making these decisions, as if I have free will, as if what I do matters and has ripple effects that do change the world. Like if I do something bad, it hurts the world, it hurts the people around me. If I do something good, I can help the people around me. And I want to believe that I made that decision, right? So and I do have times when intellectually I do lean more toward, yeah, I think that we do have free will. It's sometimes even obvious. Of course we have free will. I choose whether or not to do this or that, this bad thing or this good thing in this moment. You know, I make that decision, don't I? I want to think that. So I guess that's again very evasive of me, but I feel like I have to live as if I do have free will and admit that I I had the humility, at least, to try to admit that I don't have the answers. I don't have the answers.
Mhm.
I'm going to live like I do have free will, but I don't really have the answers. I could be wrong about that. But there, to me, is something heroic about the hero facing that inevitable darkness, that certain doom, and choosing to live life in an affirmative way, in a way that says, I'm going to do my best. Maybe I won't make any meaning out of this, but I'm going to do my damnedest while I'm here to do it. And so to me, there's just something even heroic in that resolution, right?
And
That's where I
everything we're
fall.
talking about is why I love Wheel of Time, by the way.
Uh-huh.
Maybe it gets to read book 5 and on, not in the first 4.
It did. You just missed it. It's okay.
Oh, sorry. They were goggling over Rand so often. I must have
Well,
missed
I'll just say one word, or no, okay, so three words. Rand on Dragon Mount. Rand on Dragon Mount.
That is one of the most important moments that I've ever read. That
Yes.
that was most impactful reading moment. I still remember when I sat down and I read that moment.
And I
And
think that's what
there's
we're talking about here, that heroic
yes.
resolution. Yeah. So
And
I'm trying to
the
avoid
journey
spoilers.
up to it, the journey because the moment itself is not necessarily unique. It's a fairly simple moment,
Hmm.
but it's everything the journey going through it of Robert Jordan made me believe that the opposite could have happened. Made
Yeah.
me believe it of
Yeah.
that was special.
Yep.
That was the special aspect of it. But
I would have to
later
agree.
books, I assume. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't even remember which book that's in. Do you, Richard?
that would be book 11.
Book 11. Okay. So not Sanderson yet. It's Jordan's writing still.
Yes.
Yeah.
Still
That might have been the
The
last.
last, that was his last.
Yeah.
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 That he wrote on his own. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Or at the very I think yes. Yes, that is the case.
Okay. Yeah.
Um
It's been a long time. It's been since 2009 since I read Wheel of Time. So yeah, I'm a little fuzzy on the details, but I remember that moment is seared in my memory. Absolutely.
yeah. And I love how it permeates through the rest of the story and different characters, but most of the story in some way or another is focused on the idea of fate, free
Hmm.
will,
Hmm.
and do you fight against it? Do you fight with it? And ultimately, is it futile? Like a lot of it.
Yes.
I love it.
Yeah, Jordan was engaging with a lot of philosophy in the series,
Mhm.
both Western and Eastern, of course. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Where in Eastern philosophy, of course, there's a long-held recognition that life is fleeting. Slightly different response to that, though. Like in Beowulf, right? The response is, okay, life is fleeting, so let's do great deeds. So the bard will sing about us a little bit longer. We'll last a little longer that way. Maybe our descendants will tell stories about us, that kind of thing. Whereas the Christian poet of Beowulf is probably looking at that and saying, that's kind of futile, but I admire you for trying. And the Christian poet's hope is clearly in an afterlife, right? Whereas the Eastern answer is more like, yeah, life is fleeting, but we're part of everything. We're connected to everyone. What we do matters. These ripples that go outward from our existence matter because it affects the people around us. And it's my favorite analogy is something I read in The Heart of the Buddha's Teaching by Thich Nhat Hanh, which I've mentioned a few times. But we're like waves on the surface of the ocean. And the little happy wave, it believes that it's a little happy wave. It thinks that it's separate or different from the rest of the ocean, but really it's part of the water, isn't it? It always was, and it'll go back into the water. But that is something to celebrate, right? Is that moment of individuality, but in the context of that vast oneness, that eternal oneness, right? So that's a different answer to life is fleeting. But I think these are all important explorations, aren't they?
Oh, definitely. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So we've been talking about some of our favorites, and we haven't even gotten to the second half of your answer to my question.
Oh no.
Uh-oh.
That was question 1. Oh God.
That was half of question one.
Oh no.
Was second half the how we met part?
Oh well, I want to get to that too, but
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Wait, what was the second half? Could you remind us?
So it really was more like, okay, we covered your childhood inspirations, and what are some of the formative reads of your adult lives, I guess. And we've mentioned a few, I think, like Wheel of
Yeah.
Time, definitely for you, Richard, right?
Yeah, formative for my modern after college
Yeah.
modern reading. It it's a solid foundation on my reading journey.
Hmm. Excellent. Anything else that you want to, and then I'll get to you next, Austin, but anything else that you want to bring up as this is fundamental to my worldview, what I think of as me,
Oh,
and in terms of your favorite series now. It doesn't have to be fantasy either. It could be something else. It could even be nonfiction if you want.
The two things that are very formative, but not I don't read as much anymore, and I would like to get back to it. I read a lot of mystery novels when I was younger.
Huh?
That was probably my favorite genre. Beyond like it was fantasy and mystery. And so I loved Alan Bradley's Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie, Flavia DeLuce series.
Okay.
I actually have he released another book this year and I still haven't read it and it frustrates me. I'm gonna get to it,
Too
but
many books to read. Yeah.
so many. But no, I love mystery novels. It sparks my curiosity. I love the idea of a intricate plot that way. So that and westerns. I love
Cool.
westerns. The fact that Lonesome Dove is my favorite book is not a particular surprise to me.
Cool. Yeah, I should read more Westerns myself. Yeah. Awesome. How about you, Austin? When I read your book someday, when you've written your book and
yes.
published it, when I read your book, which authors am I going to be looking for in there to see if you have some conscious or unconscious nods in there, or would I look for the influence of particular authors in there, do you think?
Yeah, I haven't read all the series, but obviously Terry Pratchett's Discworld and that absurdist element. But I don't want to say because I haven't completed Terry Pratchett, far from it.
Okay.
But particularly Hitchhiker's Guide by
Uh-huh.
Douglas Adams is a book that I started writing my book before I read Hitchhikers as well. But
Okay.
Hitchhikers is one of those books that if you're to ask me, okay, what book not necessarily changed you, but I think back to of okay, that is a book that I like to associate with how I can view the world
Uh-huh.
in some ways of just the absurdist elements in fantasy. I think absurdism in general, and this my book spoiler alert, it's a bit absurdist,
I'd actually
but
think Hitchhiker's Guide is more absurdist than Discworld,
oh,
actually.
It
100%.
is.
100% is, yeah.
Yeah.
And mine is not that absurd, but I think when we were talking about fantasy earlier and with the special things it can do, and why I see fantasy as not only the best genre, but I see as taking the most skill. Not to say that, oh, look how skilled I am for writing fantasy, in the sense that fantasy done well when you read it to transport you to a secondary world and suspend disbelief. First, you have to do that, pull the magic trick off, then also write a good story. So you have to do multiple things. Of take any nonfiction is it takes incredible skill, research to do all of that. But let's say take that nonfiction stuff about, let's say it's totally just the medical field. That everything in that nonfiction thing is about medicine, and you have to get all the facts right. Now add a layer of fantasy, it just inherently makes that book harder in a way because get all the facts right so people can suspend their disbelief about medicine, but also then transport them into a world where they're make believe and then also believing the. So, anyways, fantasy has that element to it. And the top of that pyramid for me is absurdism. Of absurdism just goes even layers beyond. I guess you could push back in a way of saying, well, if it's so absurd, you don't have to have your grounds in reality, and you could just
Uh-huh.
you can do anything and have talking dolphins, and
It
I get that.
it makes it harder.
But
It's
the
a
skill, yeah,
world breaking on the if standard fantasy is creating your own fence around reality,
Yeah.
absurdism is somehow like breaking your own fence and
Uh-huh.
yet all the cattle stays within the area. Somehow you
that's
you
right. That's a
still
good way to put it.
somehow
Yeah.
kept the boundaries of the fence, but it does that takes way more skill because it's so easy to if you start writing an absurdist book that you just don't connect people won't connect with it and go like yeah it is too absurd or
It's
Yep.
it
very
breaks
hard
too
to
many
pull
like
off.
I'm not connected. I
Yeah.
don't suspend my disbelief. It's honestly a reason why I like Terry Pratchett's Discworld more so than Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Uh-huh.
I liked it, but that level of absurdism is just not
It's hard.
it's not particularly for me. Of
Mhm.
like, I like it, I appreciate it, but I don't love it the way I love Discworld.
It can make
Discworld is
you
the
laugh, but
right amount of absurd.
it can make you depressed, I think, a little bit too. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
connection to Discworld is different. Of
Yeah.
there's elements of it where I know that's a thing that could happen in Discworld, even if it sounds absurd. There's a there's some sense of cohesion,
Right.
and I can have a broader range of emotions in Discworld where in Hitchhikers, I was not connected to any character thing. I thought it was interesting almost the entire time. I'm going, oh, that's interesting, but I didn't care. I didn't care for a moment in that book.
And I think
And
maybe it's because it goes all the way to real absurdism, which is nothing really matters.
yeah,
You know? Whereas Discworld actually, I think, says you need like for in guards, for
mhm.
example, in the City Watch books, you have a character who, yes, expresses frustrations and that kind of thing, but ultimately he is there because he believes in something and he wants to make society better. He there's a deep held belief there that despite all the corruption and the darkness, he is determined to do something better, right? Even in Mort, you get the
You're
idea
good
that
to wear.
Thank you.
Sorry, he
oh,
hasn't read
sorry.
it. He took off his headphones for the guards.
I love Terry Pratchett so much. I don't want to ounce. That's how
We're
much I love Terry Pratchett. Yeah.
we're
I
talking
forgot.
about Mort now.
Okay.
You're good.
More. We're good.
On Mort now. Yeah, I don't think it was any real spoilers, but yeah, in Mort, death itself finds some meaning to life.
Oh, I love Mort. I
Yeah.
love Mort. Oh, it's so good.
So ultimately, I think that Pratchett is much more affirmative
Yeah,
Yes.
definitely.
than Douglas Adams. But
I, I have a strange influence sphere where I think there's three different things that influence me the most. And on that absurdist element, maybe to give a more movie examples, Everything Ever All at Once is like my second favorite movie of all time.
I
And
love that film. I actually love
yes,
that film. Yeah.
it is. I will defend that till the day I die. I have seemingly opposite. Oh, did you lag out there, Philip? You still there?
I'm still here.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I lagged that. All right. The so I have almost contradictory influences in a way where some of my favorite books and films, it will be Everything Ever All at Once, the Hitchhiker's Guide, that kind of existential, absurdist type of story, but
Yeah.
then also The Lord of the Rings and a coming of age film or a coming of age book. Where so my three big influences would be coming of age stories, absurdist stories, and then your heroic Lord of the Rings type story.
Okay.
And it's some of it seemingly is opposite, but that's kind of my brain battling with itself of personally, I put it this way. I'm agnostic. I'm not a believer, but I'm a hoper. I
Uh-huh.
just hope it's all true.
Yeah.
And I want to force myself, not force myself. I want to lead myself into a genuine belief. And it's part of my mind battling of the existential absurdist side of, okay, that's me battling against nihilism of, okay, at the very least, at the end, I'll accept existentialism or absurdism, which Everything Overall once does. To me, that's a defense of, it's basically existentialism is the answer to nihilism, is what the film is saying. And I
Yeah,
find
I
it very
agree.
profound.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so on that end, that's me battling on that side. Then the Lord of the Rings stuff, the heroic fantasy is me going, look at all this valor, honor, integrity, objective meaning. And I love all the ideas of that. And your coming of age is where it gets more personal of just making a story as micro as possible of you don't have to have a big bad Sauron in every single book. You don't have to have the death of the entire universe. I love when a story can get more micro and like in Discworld, just a simple character such as Mort contemplating with meaning and death contemplating with meaning. These very, very small stories that have somewhat small stakes, but the microcosm of those obstacles and those antagonists make it so profound and connecting with the reader. So no, sorry, I weaved around with influences, but those three things I would say heroic fantasy, absurdist, and coming of age. Those three are my biggest influences, and those will. So I think my first book will just be a mishmash of that, and it's going to come across as, "Whoa, this is just a Wheel of Time. This is just a Tolkien ripoff. What are you doing, Austin? This is just you wrote Hitchhikers too." No one's going to say that because it's not going to be anywhere close to the quality, but it will be those influences without a doubt are what's in mind.
Well, I can't wait to see what comes of that mixture.
Yeah, it's an odd mixture.
But I do 100% agree with you that everything, everywhere, all at once is ultimately there's a real affirmation in that, at least in terms of personal relationship and connection.
Oh
That
yeah.
there's real beauty in that film, especially at the end. There's a real beauty in the connection that happens in the course of that story, right? I
Uh,
find it elevating, actually. I don't feel depressed when I watch that film. I feel a sense of beauty and connection, and that matters, you know?
yep. That
It
is stunning.
it takes you from it takes you a step back from the edge of nihilism and back to extent existentialism,
Yep.
Yeah,
which is
good way to put it.
far more preferable to nihilism.
Mm.
And
For me,
no,
it
that
is. Yeah.
yeah, no, compared to nihilism, yeah, it definitely is better. And so yeah, it is really beautiful.
You will have defenders, of course, of nihilism. We may even get some comments, even, which would be great. But yeah, there are some people who believe that nihilism is ultimately, the most meaningful response to everything, or the most honest response, or whatever. Uh,
Was it Nietzsche that don't people listening and don't do this?
Constantly misquoted.
Yeah. Well, when Nietzsche says God is dead, he's essentially Nietzsche is more existentialist because he's saying, well, God is dead. What replaces God? And what is this void? So if in a less religious culture, how do we create our own meaning?
Hmm.
What do we make of this? And I was I started reading Thus Spoke Zarathustra from
hmm?
Nietzsche. I stopped because I'm not at that level yet. It was too rambling for me, a rambler. It was too rambling yet for me to get into. I'll have to go back and go with a different mindset. But don't, if anybody's listening, don't take this seriously, obviously. But I think he was making a point at some point of like, okay, if you're actually nihilist, you know, and okay, bye. As in, what's the point of living if you're a
Ah,
nihilist? Of if nothing matters, okay, the conversation over. Goodbye.
right.
You're over here. So
Well,
I'm saying this in my own terms as well, as in the
yeah.
the opposition against nihilism. Okay, if nothing matters, prove your own point. Of
Well, that's something of when you're talking about what you personally believe and how you
yeah,
act. I think there's the intellectual side of you may believe that free will doesn't exist,
Hmm.
and intellectually you say that,
right,
but what you actually believe is probably a lot closer to how you act.
Mm,
It's one thing to say, "Oh, I've walked through this in my head," versus if you truly believe that there is no such thing as free will, you're going to act very differently than a lot of people do. And that's
mm,
kind of where at least I am of like I have to say I believe in free will because
yeah.
I operate in the world that way.
Yeah.
Despite my logical arguments against it, it's
Mhm.
how I live my life and it's how I act. So that has to be how I believe.
Yeah, we're
Just
on
the
the same
nature of
boat
it.
there. We're on the
yeah, your
same boat there.
conviction, yeah,
Yeah. And
Uh,
I think ultimately too, I want to have the humility to admit I don't know the answers.
right.
I'm out there looking, I'm seeking, and I find meaning in the quest, you know. And if that's all I can get from it, okay, so be it, you know.
And the beautiful thing about hitchhikers is it's not even I don't have the answers. It's I don't have the questions.
Yeah,
That's what
yeah.
it's okay. Well, we have the answer. It's
Actually, we
40.
do have the answer. It's 42.
Yeah, and
yeah.
so then it is what's the question? Well, maybe we're asking what's the meaning of life. Maybe we have to ask a different question. And I'm just going, okay, the search, and fantasy is a search. Stories are a search, and that
Yeah.
is constantly going forward. That is again fantasy, the best. It's the greatest. Did we answer your first question? Did we get there?
I think we
Maybe.
kind of did. Yeah.
Sort of.
And we had fun. Look, maybe we didn't answer the question, but we had fun along the way. So,
It was the journey.
See, it wasn't about the question. We were trying to find the question to the answer we already knew.
Yes.
so, but I do want to get a sense for maybe the present of your channel and your collaboration together. And I haven't heard. You've probably told the story before of how you guys got together and everything. I would imagine on your channel. You want to give me a version of that, and then we can talk about what you're doing. What are some of the reads you're engaging in now that you're really excited to be reading, or maybe what are you looking at maybe in the future? Where are we
Mhm.
going with your channel? All that fun stuff. So let's start with how the heck did To Ramble come to be?
You want to start us off?
Yeah, so Rich and I, we met our freshman year of college. I was his high school friend, and him went to the same college, and I was his high school friend's roommate.
Okay.
So his high school friend, I was roommates with him. So Rich would come over to hang with his buddy, and I was there. And so that's how we met. And then we started being closer friends when we got a poker group together in college. So we love some Texas
Poker
Hold'em.
is great bonding material.
It's the
Yeah.
best
Oh yeah.
bonding material. You just have a bunch of you sitting at a table, hours to talk, hours to lose money. It's great. It's the best time. And we met playing poker, and then just we have a friend group that we've had since then from college. And this was, oh my God, 10, oh, almost 10 years ago. So yeah, almost 10
Yeah,
years ago.
looking for gray hairs. Yeah.
And since then we okay, so you want to take we can intermix.
Sure.
You take it from there and I'll jump back.
At that point, after college, us and three more of our friends decided to move into a house together.
Okay.
Um, basically well, actually, it was four and then eventually five, but group of us decided to move into a house together in Virginia. So none of us had great jobs, but we didn't want to be in sad studio apartments, and I think we could barely even afford that. So
Yep.
coming together, we were able to get a nice house together for relatively cheap rent. So we lived together how many years?
3, 4, something.
3, 4 years.
4 years.
4 years
Yeah.
together. And during that time, I went through different career changes, and a
All
part
four
of
of us did, yeah.
yeah. But the big part for me is when I was doing security, I I wasn't allowed a phone, any kind of internet access. I was allowed nothing. I had to sit in a room for 8 hours doing, and especially when I was on the night shift, it was nothing.
Loads of reading time.
Mhm.
And for years, I hadn't been reading. And Austin here said, "Hey, give the Way of Kings a shot. It's
Wow.
big. You'll have a lot of reading. It'll last you at least a couple shifts." And that's how I started getting back into reading. Is I would just
Wow.
sit alone, going through night shift reading The Way of Kings, and
Huh.
that was a great training of starting off only being able to read for like 15 minutes at a time, and then having to put it down, and then eventually getting to the point I could read for basically 8 hours straight if given the opportunity, and great training. But that sparked our love of reading after that. I've just started picking up more books and telling Austin,
Yep.
like, gotta read this. Hey, Austin, read Red Rising. And Austin was like, nah, who cares about Red Rising? That's not important. And move on to other things.
Yeah, yeah.
Can I
So,
just interrupt for a second? I just want to say what a solid foundation for a friendship. Just the way you can bond over books. It's a beautiful thing. I just want to say that because it's something that's important for me in my relationship with my children is the books we read together. It's a part of our relationship. And I think it's a beautiful part of your friendship that you shared these these stories with each other. That what a solid foundation for a friendship, really. That's
Yeah, Rich just needed the closest body to him that would read a book. He just okay, here, whoever picks up his recommendation. All right, fine. He was stuck with me. If he had more options, things could have straight.
I had zero other options.
Well, there was 3 options. There was me or the other 2 roommates.
You understand the pain of, okay, a side tangent
Yeah, yeah.
of, and it's just due to our jobs. Like, I was reading
all
the time.
Yeah.
I was killing a Stormlight book. Like, I read Way of Kings in roughly a week.
That's
And,
that's
like,
that's
each
pretty. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
I think I read Oathbringer in like 3 days.
Wow. Okay.
But that's just the nature of my job.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting here waiting for this guy having a real job too, and like he's working on had to go on top of that. Please read more. Please finish.
Yes, yeah.
I waited. I think a year. Like, I stopped on Oathbringer and I was like, I'll wait. I'll wait for you to catch up and we'll read Rhythm of War together.
Yep.
And I waited a year.
Wow.
Still weren't done. And I I eventually just
Yeah.
read anyway. And Ugh.
Caught up eventually. Yeah.
I was flying by books going like, Austin, read this one. Read this one. Hey, are you done with that last book yet? No? God damn it. I need something.
The good thing about us now is we have our TBRs combined. We read the same books now all the
Oh, you do?
pretty much
Al-
one to one. Yeah.
Yeah,
Our
almost
TBRs
all
are
of
just
them.
conjoined and because
Okay.
we want to discuss it together, we want to discuss it on the pod. It all just makes sense to do it. And we're reading the same series anyways that we like similar things. We
Yeah.
diverge on a few things. And the things we do, we
Right.
just stop reading them and we just don't do videos on them if it's that bad.
Okay.
And so,
Okay. Because
anyways,
like
the
Richard likes Farm Boys. You're not so excited about Farm Boys.
Yes.
precisely that.
I need more farm boys in
Oh
my TBR.
yeah. Give me mine boys. Give me
Mind boys?
miners. No, like
Ah!
pickaxe. Darrow. I'm talking about Darrow, not children. Jeez, I always okay. Give me
Miners with an
pickaxe.
E. Miners with an E.
Yes. It's so out of context. Okay, so but Rich and I, when we met college, we started getting back into reading, but we were during COVID, we graduated in 2020. So the basically our May graduation didn't happen and
Oh, I'm
people
sorry. You were
yeah,
that. Yeah.
people went back home. So I was back in New York. He did you stay in the area in DC?
Yep.
Yeah, he did. So he still stayed because he had an apartment in the area. But we went off to our own separate ways, and that's how we reconvened. And a bunch of us that had to go back home were saying, "Hey, let's go back to our college hometown area of Virginia, DC, and we'll get a
Okay.
house together." And even before moving in, Rich and I were on the phone talking about what's something we could make meaning of our time. Of we're in our 20s,
Yeah.
what else are we doing with our lives? Let's do something important. I graduated with degrees I wanted nothing to do with, so I was doing jobs that I wasn't passionate about, and
Huh.
likewise with Rich, he was doing
Yeah.
security, security,
How
and
existentialist of you guys.
yeah, very, and we were trying to figure out what meaning can we make of this, and we first had the idea. There was a lot of ideas. I think you remember when drop shipping was big. That was one day conversation of no, we don't want to drop ship. That seems weird. And so, yeah. And then the next iteration of that was a
Dumpster rental.
dumpster rental business where we
Buy a truck.
buy a
and
truck,
rent out the dumpster and then all that stuff. Like
yep.
the business.
The issue is we're not passionate about trash, unfortunately. So we're like, okay, this could have something, but I really don't want to do that. And then we got to something of, okay, here's something we both like. We both like food. We like cooking. I'm Italian. What if we do a pasta making
Barely.
business? What if we do a pasta making business where we found this pasta making machine that you can pay for $300? I still have it at the place. It's great. And you put all the ingredients in and it spews out homemade pasta instead of doing the whole you have to roll it and we said
Probably
what
need
if we
about
make
100 of those, but
oh
yeah.
yeah it's fantastic and we decided what if we wanted to make a company called Impossibly Good and that could be our brand's name.
You had the name. You had the name.
We had the LLC formed. We were ready for this thing, and we were so we wanted to make this a thing, and we started looking more into it. And there were so many food cottage laws of okay, you can't poison people accident. Like, what if we had the pasta staying out too? Not we weren't putting arsenic in it. We're saying what if we cut the pasta out too long? Somebody gets sick from the pasta. There's all this food cottage stuff of how do you sell it online
We
versus
would
at a
need to
market and
We would actually need to get our home registered
yeah.
as the place of business, and then we'd have to get the kitchen itself inspected. It would have to pass certain food cottage laws, or we would have to rent a communal, like commercial kitchen
Yeah.
to do it. And just all this stuff, we're going, man, dealing with
That's-
food sucks.
There's just
I mean,
how we
it's
just eat
just-
the food.
There's
It
too
proved,
many
yeah,
laws.
it proved impossible, I guess.
Exactly that. And that's how it came around to that fell through. We always wanted to do something together and just okay, what's something meaningful we can build that would be exciting. It could just be a side. It didn't have to be a main thing, just a hobby, something that consumes our time while we have the time. And that's where it just led us to naturally we both are addicted to stories and that wasn't something on top of our mind that we could do as a hobby, that we could do as something that would build and be something like the community we have today. I think that iteration was, hey, he had a lot of time to read. I like to write. I like to read. Love movies. That was something that our friend group was huge about to begin with, and one night that you can take it away from there because
Yeah, we were just chatting at the dining room table about a couple books that we read recently and religion, and basically we chatted for like 3 4 hours straight, and it was something like,
one of many, but yeah.
yeah, 3 a.m. And then at the end of it going, you know what? We can talk so easily for just hours. You know, if Joe Rogan can do this, why can't we? Why can't
Yeah,
we just put this on the internet?
that's right.
The start of every podcast, really. Two
Huh.
two guys going like, we could yap and put it online. And so we came up with the idea of To Ramble, and initially it was going to be books and movies and
Okay.
talking about it.
Huh.
And then it just kind of changed into basically books only.
Interesting, because I would guess that you'd have a bigger audience if you were doing movies. Or am I wrong about that?
Um, Not necessarily.
Okay.
So niching down tends to, especially when you're a lot smaller. So
Hmm.
when we were starting out, the movie YouTube space is a lot bigger. And so getting into that slice is a lot harder. Like you're just
Oh,
one
okay.
of thousands, millions really talking about said movie.
Right.
And so you have to be very time if you're gonna try and stand out, you'd have to be the first person. Like movie comes out,
Okay.
you have the first video, and we
So it's
never,
more competitive in a sense. I gotcha.
yeah.
Because
And books,
100,000 subscribers is a big BookTube channel, but that would
yeah,
be a
Yeah,
small
huge.
movie channel, I think. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so we've niched down into books, and in all honesty, it's the thing I'm personally more passionate about
Mhm.
anyway. I think
Uh-huh.
we both are. We're
Yeah.
both like books
You got to
Yeah.
follow your
generally more.
passion. You got to follow your passion. So, yeah.
That yeah, so everything aligned with, hey, this is what we'd like to talk about anyways. We're already doing it. The barrier to entry, we don't have to pass all these laws to register our house. Oh, it's just you post a
You're
video
not
up.
going to poison anybody, right?
Right. Only their thoughts and
Only their
minds.
mind.
Yes, that's
We're poisoning the mind of the youths.
it. We are Socrates. We're corrupting the youths. And we then from there we just decided, hey, let's shake on doing this for 3 months, one video a week, just to see what happens. And we'll
Okay.
reevaluate, see, are we enjoying this? Are we getting fulfillment out of this? If we are, continue doing it. And then it just kept going from there of, hey, 3 months later, oh wow, this is fun, plus we're actually getting response and we're actually building some sort of community. Because honestly, if we're posting stuff and then nobody is there, nobody's responding, we're not posting on the internet just for us to talk. Otherwise, we just talk at the dinner table. So the added benefit is, oh, there's also a community being formed. We get to have a video archive of all of our opinions and thoughts and how they change over time on books. As soon as we
Oh,
catalog something, it's going, hey, this is what I think about this book. We post a video and it's
yeah.
cool.
I use it all the time
Mhm.
now of like a book that we've read 2 years ago. I'm going like, what did I actually think about Oathbringer at the time?
Yeah.
And it's so nice to be able to just look up our own video and go, oh, and it jogs my memory
Yes.
again. And
Yep.
It's great.
I love that.
Mhm.
It's a great reading diary to look back on.
Oh my goodness, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
Mhm.
As embarrassing as my old videos are, they're a record of a sort. Yeah.
But yeah, it just has all those benefits, and that's kind of how it formed. Just that was the origin story of this rambling.
I love it. And I love that you guys found meaning in this and enjoyment. Yeah, that's just fantastic. And it shows, by the way. That's why people love your channel, is that rapport, that joy, that love of story. It absolutely shows. So that's just magnificent. So what are
So
you excited about
you're saying
now?
we wouldn't have done well if we had a dumpster diving podcast of if we just started talking, hey, the most recent trash I just collected.
You might have gone even more viral. I don't know. You never
Sorry,
know.
I cut you off on a question.
Oh, you're good. So yeah, just what are you excited about now? I mean, what are you reading now that you think, wow, this is amazing? Or what are you looking forward to? And yeah, where do you want to go with your channel? Let's get into all of that.
I think top of my list of most excited for series right now is going through Book of the New Sun.
Okay. Yeah.
And the reading experience of the whole group
Mm.
is, especially having people like Rockio help walk us through that series, has been so essential. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to book two here. I hope we do.
You're hosting the book two discussion, right?
I know, and we didn't set a time, and we need to do that.
Yep, we kind of do, don't we? I'm going
Yeah.
to be reading it after my next, or rereading it because I read
Mhm.
all four books
Mhm.
before, but I'm going to be rereading it after my current read, which is Tad Williams' the Dragonbone Chair.
Are are you finishing the whole series and going into it, or are you right now only on book one?
For Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the reread is going to be the entire trilogy, and then I'm part of a big buddy read for that, but I'm going to
Mhm.
continue with the Austin Ard books after Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, because I didn't do that before because they weren't around when I read the series like 30 years ago or whatever. So yeah.
I've been meaning to give Tad Williams a second shake of
Uh-huh.
it. That's one of the things I am most dubious about my own opinions on. Of I really did not like book two, especially, and
Okay.
then book three
Don't
did
fare
not
well.
land with me. And I
Uh,
think that was just the time that I was reading it was not the right
Sometimes
moment.
that's the case. Sometimes that's the case. But yeah, for me, I loved it when I read it the first time, and I am thoroughly enjoying. It's like a nice hot bath right now, reading the Dragonbone Chair. I just love his prose. It's that really wonderful meeting point between classical fantasy and something that was pointing to something new at the time. And he wrote it in the late 80s, originally, and it was almost prophetic of where the genre was heading in terms of fantasy going a slightly grittier route, or maybe even exploring things that in terms of with all the stuff we were talking about, right? What do you do in the darkness, and how do you respond to it, and all of that. So I love that series, and I'm so glad that 30 years later, rereading it, I love it even more actually. But yeah, if you do try it again, Richard, I hope it'll be a positive experience. But it's definitely compared to a lot of modern fantasy, it's richer to me. The prose is richer.
Yeah.
It takes its time a lot more. It is much more expansive. And I think that that can be an issue if you're used to reading much faster paced modern fantasy.
Hmm.
You get to something like this, and it's like, come on, let's go. All right, we've been in this castle for 150 pages. Let's move. So yeah, I mean, if to me, maybe the closest analogous author might be Robin Hobb in the Realm of the Elderlings, where there's a lot of slow burn stuff there as well. Like usually the first couple hundred pages of a Hobb book in Realm of the Elderlings is going to be a lot of tea sipping and a lot of, getting connected to the characters and the place and all of that, so that you actually care later on when stuff happens to those characters and to those places. But anyway, uh, so anyway, I interrupted you. What else are you looking forward to? So, Book of the New Sun is your current, like, well,
Yeah.
this is gonna occupying some mind space here, right?
That's probably the number one I'm most looking forward to. I mean, there's the rest. I'm happy to continue on with a bunch of other series, and I really want the rest of this year to be a year of finishing already started series,
Yeah.
not
Yeah,
starting
yeah.
new ones. Like we need to close down the TBR,
We do. Yeah.
handle everything else first.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the one
Um,
problem with BookTube is that it does not incentivize you to finish series. It incentivizes you to start series, pretty much.
Right.
Yeah.
yeah, but what are you looking forward to right now?
Top one's got to be Sun Eater of the finish coming end of this
Yeah.
year. That's going to be the most exciting release. Also, the Will of the Many sequel, Strength of the Few.
Okay.
Can't
Yep.
wait for that.
Recently
So
read The Will of the Many. Yep. Liked it a
those
lot.
those two are my most anticipated reads of the year. They're also being released this year. I'm finishing up Monte Cristo right now. It is a large tome. It's a great book. It's just a large book. So I'm almost done with Monte Cristo. And then right after that, well, we're doing our book club read, which is Darker Shade of Magic.
Hmm.
I've never read a V. E. Schwab before.
I read that. Yep. Okay. Just the
Did you
first
enjoy
book.
that?
It was fine. I decided ultimately that I would not read the rest of the series, but
Sure.
it was fine. I felt like in some ways it read, and this is from coming from me, by the way, is not at all derogatory. I think that I have heavy respect for great YA, but it felt YA where didn't seem to be marketed that way to me as a reader,
Mm.
but it
Mhm.
felt a little more YA in tone. And then there were certain other things, little niggles I had with it. But I want to try her um, books again. But the Addie LaRue, that one, the that's
Oh
not the
yeah,
title, but I forget the whole title. But
the life of
The Life
something.
of Addie LaRue, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, it might be that.
That's the one I want to try next of
Okay.
hers. But this series did not work very well for me. But yeah,
There is that. I haven't read it yet, obviously, but there's that sense of a book that is for adults but feels, not in your words, but childish or YA, that
right.
you go, okay, I think the audience you're trying to reach, it's not written for them. As if it's a book that's Maze Runner, again, to go back to it, it is for young adults and it feels and is written as in young adults, you can be more lenient toward it and go, okay, obviously this is that kind of market, but maybe it's something about the themes or the storytelling is supposed to reach adults, but doesn't read for that audience. I don't know Darker Shade of Magic, but there's certainly books like that that I've read
Mhm.
and thought, okay, it's attempting to reach this audience. It's actually trying to reach me. I am the target audience. However, this reads for a different audience. Well, I won't say examples to be derogatory toward some indie authors, but I've seen that in some cases where it also takes part of a skill. But did you have a point there with
I feel very similar
yeah, you
about the
did.
book. It
Okay.
is
Oh, you read A Darker Shade of Magic already?
I have like an hour left to
Oh,
read,
okay. Okay.
basically.
Pretty much
So
done.
I'll be finishing it this either today or tomorrow.
Nice.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
And
Yeah.
yeah, no, I like it well enough, but
Uh-huh.
yeah,
All
I
right, can't wait to read this average book. I'm so stoked. Okay. Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
pretty much
yeah, I remember the villains were particularly flat and not very fleshed out, and it felt very just kind of shoved in there to me. But
that would be one of my larger complaints.
uh-huh.
The
Yeah.
villains, yeah.
keep making me excited. Yep, yep. Keep
Sorry.
it. I have to read it. It's for a book club, so I do have to read it. But so that as far as excitement goes, it would be Sun Eater, Sun Eater, Strength of the Few, and excited to get to Memories of Ice from Malazan
Yeah.
because
Yes.
I want to finish Malazan so badly.
yeah, I'm excited for that. Book two got me. So book one I did not like. Book two I thought was great. But book two wasn't Sun Eater level book two of holy crap, this is my series. So I read Malazan book two and went, okay, I like this now. I'm waiting for one of the upcoming Malazan books to make me a full on fan. So I'm hoping Memories Ice. I've heard
Prince
that's
of
the
Ice
best
could
one.
fit the bill. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm excited to read that and go, okay, do I get the bug? Am I gonna get the bug of okay, we got to binge this series
I,
now?
I feel like Malazan is one of those series like if we're in on book three, I feel like
We're just gonna go
we
through.
just have to
Hmm.
just barrel through
Yep.
it. Maybe a break before book nine and then read nine and 10 together.
Okay.
That's kind of what I've heard
They are
about.
one book.
They
Uh,
are one book,
they
and
are
so
one.
needs
Dust of Dreams and The Crippled God are really one story. Yeah.
Got it.
Much more so than the rest of the series. Yeah.
What about you? What do you have reading up or upcoming that you're excited about?
So I'm just finishing the Dragonbone Chair and
Yep.
absolutely loving it. And after that, I'm actually picking up the second book in Book of the New Sun.
Yes.
The Flaw of the Conciliator. Um,
As a
and
reread, right?
that's a reread for me. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
I do want
Anything
to.
you're excited to finish that you're going, man, I just can't wait to finish this series.
You mean in terms of just different series that I'm in the
Yeah,
middle
yeah,
of?
like new
yeah, yeah.
something you haven't read before.
Wars of Light and Shadow, for sure.
Oh,
I've read through book seven at this point, and I want to read eight, nine, 10, and 11. Uh, so that would definitely be one because this is one of those for me, just kind of landmark series in the genre. Like there for me, Malazan, Realm of the Elderlings, these are series that are not only long and vast, but they're deep. They're incredibly deep, and I feel like Wars of Light and Shadow is going to be one of those for me. That it's going to be just a life-changing, journey at the end of it. So that is definitely one. Um, And that I don't know if you've read anything by Jenny Wirtz yet or not, but
We just got sent a couple books by her, and so we will be starting her series soon. As
Hmm.
much as
okay.
I said we want to close off the TBR,
Yeah,
when
we have
Danny
to do.
says sends us some books, we make the exception.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
we will
yeah.
read that.
I mean, you could start with her standalone to Ride Hell's Chasm if you want to get a flavor for her prose, which is for many people a kind of an acquired taste, I would say, because
That
it is it's more challenging than most of what you read, most of what I read. It's definitely more challenging, and it can be like a whoa, okay, I got to have my dictionary handy here, or it's going to take me a little longer to adjust to this prose. But once you do, for people for whom it clicks, it really sinks deep. So yeah. Uh,
I
that's
can't
actually the
wait.
book she sent us on recommendation. We asked her which book we should
okay.
read first, and
Yeah.
that's the one she sent us.
It
So
gives you a good taste, and it is a standalone, different world. It's not in the same world as Wars of Light and Shadow, so but similar in terms of the level of prose, I would
mhm.
say, and the thoughtfulness in terms of which she weaves in the themes. So that's there as well. Yeah,
Awesome, very cool.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, anything else you're excited about that we want to in our final moments here?
I'm
Talk.
excited to be the most frequent guest on Dr. Philip Chase's episodes. I can't wait to be your next guest and your following, and this to be a weekly thing. Just to
That would be awesome. That would be awesome. I'm still hoping for that 3 to Ramble thing. So
oh did you decide yet? The in conclusion,
Oh yeah,
not the
nice
put you on
little
the
bow on.
look at him and make him uncomfortable.
the truth is both of you are irreplaceable.
That's what makes a good fantasy character. Is the fantasy character irreplaceable? Can anyone replace this fictional character that you're writing? That's the good tell of a unique. Doesn't mean you're a good person or a good character. Doesn't mean we're good. It
No,
just means
no,
we're unique,
irreplaceable.
and
Yeah.
that's
We each have
it
our
is
roles to play,
yes.
and thankfully we're not too identical. Even
Yeah.
though our book opinions are starting to,
Well, we
Uh-oh.
read the same stuff,
we're
and it,
starting to merge a little
yeah,
on book opinions. We
yeah,
don't disagree that often.
yeah. Or we don't discuss the ones we disagree on a lot. Like there's some, there's some,
Sure,
yeah,
I guess.
yeah. Are
Well,
there? I'm trying to think if the opposite is true because there separate conversation. We're gonna give a list of what do we disagree on so we can feel like individuals again.
that
That's a
could be
video.
fun.
What books we most disagree on?
The
That's
Oh,
a video.
video. That's a video.
That's a
perfect.
video right there. Perfect.
We just witnessed the birth of a future video for 2 to Ramble. So
Yes.
there it is, history in the making. But let me say that we are glad that you guys are here, that you are irreplaceable and unique, and we are the better for it because of everything you add to our community. Really grateful to have had this chance to chat with the two of you. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Our pleasure. Yeah, thank you for having us. This we like to get into these off topics of rambling around free will, the defense of fantasy, how we our origin story, our meaning, what is meaning. That's all up our alley. So I
Nihilism,
honestly,
existentialism,
yes, that
all the
And
isms.
then
that
and
essay
then
you read.
throw in there some Dungeon Crawl videos, and we're and that's our channel.
We will be reading those that essay. I wrote it down. Let me make sure I have the author right. Stephen Donaldson, his
Stephen
two essays.
Donaldson, yep, author of the of Lord Fowl's Bane is the first one, but it's a Thomas Covenant series. It's a really landmark series in the genre,
Yeah.
which
Awesome.
everyone should check out. But those two essays he wrote on epic fantasy, be sure to check those out. Just Google Stephen Donaldson epic fantasy essay or something like that.
Definitely. We'll
Great.
we'll do.
Yeah,
Thank you much, Philip. Thank you for having us on. It was great coming here.
yeah, awesome. And thank you everybody for watching. There will be, of course, a link in the description to the channel to Ramble, aka Richard and Austin, Austin and Richard, whichever you want to say. But again, thank you everybody for watching, and until next time.